So at the end of part 1, the narrator, whom we will call Cervantes, breaks off and says, and that's where my story, the one I was taking this from, broke off, and I didn't have a record after that. And so he goes on and he says that he spends some time looking for another record of it. Always keeping his eye out and searching high and low and inspecting bookshops and old antiquarian places. And at one point, he says he was in the Alcana marketplace at Toledo. Toledo, further south. Again, a center of Islamic culture within Spain of that time, and more so previously. Spain had been sweeping out all the Muslims and Jews for quite some time at this point. But there was a new round of it recently, so it was a hot topic. And significantly, Cervantes, the narrator, says that he had been browsing through looking for something else. He wasn't even particularly looking for anything of Don Quixote. He says, in fact, even if I'd been hunting a different language, older and better, which here the editor suggests is Hebrew, which is interesting. He is seeking out another language. In a place of the great Muslim tradition within Spain, the Moorish tradition, he is possibly seeking out, arguably, maybe Hebrew, perhaps Arabic, it's not sure, but he's not looking for conventional Spanish language stuff there. There is a tradition of scholarship that tries to find out stuff about Cervantes' life and his character and his identity. And we really don't know that much. We know slightly more than we do of Shakespeare, but really not much. They are very exact contemporaries. But we know very little. One of the rumors about him that some scholars have traced down and are very curious about is that he may have a Jewish. His mother, I believe, might have been Jewish, but was forced to convert. Became a converso. So that would explain, if he was seeking out a better language, Hebrew, that's curious. But either way, you can see he has the character of Cervantes, of the narrator here, is one who is curious and, in fact, almost avid to learn about these other cultures within Spanish culture, to develop some familiarity. Now, he soon finds something that is written in an Arabic script that he cannot read, but he's curious about it. So he asks somebody to hey, what does this look? What does this say? And they say, and they mention a little. They just read a line, and within that line comes up the name Dulcinea, and that sparks his identity, his identity perhaps, but his recognition. And curious that little spark of what is for him an ideal, not a real person necessarily, but an ideal of perfection in the world, pops up in an Arabic text. Interesting correspondence there. And he is intrigued, and he gets somebody to go and help him take this book. It's an old manuscript, a notebook essentially, and he gets another Moor to translate it for him. They go into a church, a nearby church, a Christian church theoretically, where they can talk about it. And you see in this great plurality of cultures that is respected. And in this broader story of Don Quixote, or in this narrower story of Don Quixote regretting the passing of a nobler time, we are inevitably led to consider that, well, you know, a passing of time in Spain at this point would also have to include the slow eradication of pluralism within the culture. For like 100 years at this point, Spain has been slowly pushing out, not that slowly, pushing out all Muslims and Jews and trying to create a uniform Catholic country. Muslims, Jews, and Protestants, they all got to go. So you get this sense of, well, it's a story about, you know, mourning for times past. Can he say outright in Spain at that time that we should all be mourning for the passing of the grand cultures of the Moors and the Jews within Spain? Maybe not. I mean, in a time of the Inquisition, it's very easy to get yourself labeled a heretic, and Cervantes, I don't think he really wants to be tortured. So he's not going to go there. But just by setting up these little coincidences, these little curious patterns that develop, you can see him nudging in that direction and inviting the reader to consider these things, leaving open that space where somebody who's just going to say, well, yeah, that doesn't really make sense. What's going on there? Why is it an Arabic text? Why is he looking for a Jewish text? What's that about? Inviting the reader through just these little details that are very easy to pass over. You could dispel an awful lot of it just as a kind of exoticism. He's in this exotic marketplace, and it's part of the Orientalist tradition, you could argue, where he's trying to be, or he's trying to indulge in a certain Eastern exoticism where he wants to breathe in the Orient, which is a kind of objectification and othering and all of that stuff. But there is that space to come in and say, what does that really mean? So Cervantes is trusting the reader and inviting the reader to come in and fill that space with a little speculation. He's not going to say one way or the other, because one way or the other could get him put on the rack. But he has no culpability if somebody's going to draw some wild conclusions about what he might mean. He can point to the text and say, where does it say that? Where does it say that Spain is weakened culturally because of its treatment of Jews and Moors? Where? Plausible deniability. But he picks up the story, and he picks back up right at that spot where Quixote and the Basque were charging at one another with swords drawn, and they come together, they clash, they beat the bejesus out of one another. Quixote wins. Quixote, for an old man, 50. For an old man, he is surprisingly virile. He kicks some butt in these stories. He's not that pathetic. You can see how somebody who is perhaps physically capable, but is shoved into a quiet little library for his entire life, is relishing this opportunity to get out in the world, even if it's just a world of his fantasy. He can only access through his fantasy, to get out and just be physical and to give the full expression of his physical identity. Who doesn't love doing stuff from time to time? Even if he probably aches a little bit more afterwards than he used to, who knows? But he makes the he knocks down the Moor, or the Basque rather, and the Basque is said to be saying, as he's standing over him, the Basque could not speak a word. Whenever somebody mentions words, think about it, because this whole book is about language and the use of it and the veil of it. So here he could not speak a word, so he sort of fades into the background, and Quixote goes over to the coach with the lady in it, and he says, okay, as long as I will let you pass, I will honor you, as long as you see to it that your attendant, your knight, goes and presents himself to Lady Dulcinea, Doña Dulcinea, in Toboso, and says that, he has been vanquished or whatever in her name, yada, yada, yada. And everybody in the entourage are just sort of nodding along like, yeah, you're crazy, you're insane. So once again, we hear, we don't get any quoted language from them, but he responds to them saying, accordingly, trusting your word, I will do no further harm. What we don't have, however, are her words. So that's a curious little dynamic that Cervantes plays with a lot. Who gets to speak, and what the function of language itself is, and how sometimes it illuminates and sometimes it occludes, confuses. So from there, Quixote and Sancho wander off, and they have a little time together, a little get to know you time. They have a very interesting conversation about knighthood itself and the duties and the expectations. And Quixote finds himself a little frustrated that Sancho has no idea what the rules are for what he's supposed to do and what they should expect and all that. And Sancho Panza says, well, I have no great knowledge of knightly behavior or squirely behavior for me, because I cannot even read and write. So here's an interesting dynamic again, where Quixote is delusional because supposedly he has read so much. And here he is paired up in this adventure of his own delusion with somebody who is completely illiterate. And there's an interesting dynamic going on there that you can go crazy with. They talk about, they come across a group of shepherds or goat herds who are just sitting around in an encampment, and they have their flocks nearby, and they fall into conversation with them. They're having a nice meal, and they invite Quixote and Sancho to sit and join them. And it's a lovely little scene, and all of these bucolic people are sitting around enjoying very common food, but well cooked, and Sancho really likes that. He makes himself at home. He loves, he loves to eat, and so he's enjoying that. And he loves the wine bag that they carry, and he helps himself to that. So he's living the good life right there. He got beat up pretty good in that fight with the Basque. So he's hurting, But the shepherds just look at the wounds and say, yeah, yeah, okay, I'm gonna get you some. I'm gonna make you a little mixture, something with rosemary and a few other herbs and natural ingredients that we have. That'll fix you up. You'll be good as new in no time. Natural ingredients. These people are tied to the earth. They are very common people. Significantly, common people are often portrayed in this story as being very kind, very welcoming. This crowd of goat herds and shepherds just invite these two to sit down and join them and share their food. It's reminiscent of the innkeeper we saw in the first episode, in the first Sally, where he was basically very decent to Quixote and very indulgent, just sort of played along. And the neighbor who brought him home, who brought Quixote home after that first Sally, who just waited until dark to bring him into town so nobody would see what a mess he had become. Ordinary people acting with basic decency, and the food and the medicine, the herbal medicine that they're using, is another indication of that they are just common people who are very tied to nature and not a lot of civilization. Civilization in one form, of course, is literature, which is what has led supposedly Quixote astray. So you can see all of these little themes playing around, all of these little dynamics weaving throughout this text that are fun to just pick up and follow along, because you can stitch together so many different patterns of meaning. But as they're talking, and they talk about a number of things, particularly about like knighthood. And there's one guy who's particularly interested in, well, what are you doing, and why is that okay? It turns out they learn of a friend of theirs has died, Grisostomo, and they work out among themselves that, okay, we're gonna go, there's a funeral, we're gonna go see it, but of course we have all these flocks. One guy, of course, leads up, since it's a very nice little community and they all help one another. One guy sticks his hand up and says, look, I will look over everybody's flock, I'll be responsible, you guys go to the funeral and give my best. And along the way, and well, Quixote, who has heard some of the story of this person who has died at this point, and he wants to go too. And of course, if he goes, Sancho's going to. So they make this little trip, this little entourage, and they get there, and they hear more about this person who died, and it's an interesting story. He is a wealthy son of merchants, I believe, rising middle class, who gave up the family business so that he could be a shepherd and write poetry. What middle class parent wouldn't want that? But he has done that, and he has fallen in love with this girl who wouldn't give him the time of day, and so he became desperate and he died. And the implication in that desperate is that he has committed suicide. Not something you can explicitly say in a deeply Catholic country without getting a little bit of blowback. And again, Cervantes doesn't want to ruffle too many feathers, so he knows how to stay just on this side of controversy. And so he just lets that go. But they have this story, and then at the funeral itself, they sing this song that the deceased had written before he died, although I believe the staging of the funeral was largely his making. He puts it on kind of like a drama, and it plays out kind of like a drama with different characters walking in and out and having speeches. So there's something very theatrical and artificial about that. It's important to remember that among other forms of writing, Cervantes wrote many plays, and he had a sense of how to orchestrate a drama on a stage. But the story that he sings, or the song that he sings, is one of kind of a sharp-elbowed story. And since you wish, O cruel one, the power of your hard heart proclaimed abroad in every language known, in every nation of men, I'll take a painful sound from hell itself, change the very voice I sing with. Which is quite bitter, quite harsh. The O cruel one is, he's talking about the woman whose affections he could not win. Now, it's important to understand the context of what's going on here, because this is a wealthy person, an aristocrat of sorts, who becomes a shepherd. And whenever you see shepherd, at this point in history, and really going back even, you have to think of Arcadian literature, pastoral literature. There is a tradition leading down primarily from the Greeks with stories like Daphnis and Chloe, where they come down to us stories of shepherds who just sing songs and are poets and just wander around out in the fields in a kind of perfect Edenic world. And you get an awful lot of that in here. There's constant references to music. There's references to how beautiful the landscape is. And this is all an image of this perfect world that that is the site of another genre of literature of the time, the pastoral. You get artists like Sannazaro and Gongora and a number of them at the time, where they're all just shepherds playing music in the fields and having ideal loves, and it's another style exactly like the courtesy and knightly tradition literature that Quixote really loves. So you have another example in Grisostomo of a guy, a well-off, comfortable human being who abandons that identity to go live this other life as a literary cliche. The parallel is quite obvious. He is going to go live as a shepherd, and it's an exact parallel to Quixote going to live, or Quijana going to live as Quixote the Knight. And you get this into this because it's a very gentle style of literature. Very, everything is always perfect. So when he starts off his song with that "Oh cruel one," and you get this really harsh note in there, you get a sense of the ugliness that is possible within there when that idyllic nature is somewhat spoiled. And it's spoiled by somebody who just won't play along. And he feels quite hurt that this girl, Marcella, who we learn about soon enough, will not reciprocate his feelings. Because when he is, he's, from his perspective, well, I'm a good-looking guy, I have a lot of money, and I have the character to have given up all that money to go and live the artistic life, the bucolic, pastoral Arcadian life, pursuing a kind of artistic ideal. So why wouldn't anyone want to come and live in the fields with me? at the end of that song, which goes on for quite some time, and I believe Cervantes had written it previously, before the novel, so it's sort of an odd fit at certain points. But he, after that song, who shows up but that girl who had scorned him, the object of that whole song. And we learn about her. Her name is Marcella. She is also from a wealthy family. She is quite well off. Her parents died when she was fairly young. I think her mom died in birth. Her dad died when she was a young girl. She was left in the care of her uncle, who is superintending her. He is a priest and is superintending her fortune, and is just trying to field marriage offers from everybody so that she can then be settled. And whoever gets married to her will inherit all of her money. So, she's probably got a lot of suitors, but she is uninterested. For whatever reason, she wants nothing to do with these people or marriage at all. And she shows up at this funeral. And again, it's a great theatrical moment because you can see her walking in like with a staff and the whole like shepherdess garb. And she just issues this speech, and it's a remarkable speech filled with more literary cliches about literature, conventions from literature, but also from different kinds of literature like logic and argument and great speeches. Her speech is prose, while his was poetry. Chrysostomus was poetry. Hers is prose, but really it plays into the same literary conventions, or the same notion of literary conventions. They're both literary cliches of a sort. She got disillusioned with all these people coming after her, and she decided that she just wanted to be a shepherdess. So she walked away from all of it and took her sheep and walked off into the fields. She is doing exactly what Chrysostomus was doing. It's just that, his vision included her being the ideal lady who would join him. She is saying, no, I am a shepherdess on my own, and I have no desire to take on a partner. And she beats back the whole notion that she can, that he has any right to expect otherwise from her. That, there's a really, really assertive feminist argument in this speech. Heaven, you say, has made me beautiful, so very beautiful that you are moved, unable to help yourself to love me, and because of the love you show me, I am obliged, you say, as also you desire to love you. She doesn't understand that she's supposed to love him too. That's automatic. She doesn't get a vote. Her uncle, the priest, has been, always perk up your ears when they say priest, has been essentially putting her on the market and fielding offers, very few of which probably have anything to do with compatibility, but just trying to find a suitable match. And she's saying, no, I have no obligation to you. It's a tremendous argument for free will. And in this case, it's the free will to be a literary cliche, which is, of course, again, what Quixote is, Quijana is. He's demanding that, okay, I have the right to go and live as I want. And that is the entire argument that Quixote offers. And significantly, he does not pop up a lot in this episode. He's just one of the crowd witnessing it. And we don't really get a lot of references to him. He's just sort of sitting there as this very conspicuous element within this drama. But everybody who's reading the novel is sort of looking around and thinking in the back of his head, well, now, Where is he, and what's his reaction to any of this? He's taking it in just like we're taking it in. Are we then somehow equivalent to him? Should we be worrying? Are we living a literary cliche? Are we exercising our free will? Are we just going along with what other people expect us to do? All of these little questions come up just in the way Cervantes has situated this drama and orchestrated us into a position where we kind of feel obligated to say, well, do we need to stand up and make a speech about how we have the right to determine for ourselves our relation to these characters and our relation to reality outside? It's a really quite discomforting situation that you're in. And he doesn't really say much until the very end. Marcella finishes her speech, and then she just very defiantly and, in a mic drop moment, just heads back out, turns, leaves, and goes back out into her field to tend her sheep, supposedly. And some people are in the crowd are saying, let's go get her, as if they're going to hunt her down and lynch her or something. It's a little uncertain what's going on there. And he says, Quixote stands up for her. Quixote says, no, do not. Noticing this and thinking it a proper occasion to act chivalrously, again, he associates it with what he is supposed to do as he has read in books, and assist a maiden who needed help. Again, we have that situation where he is seeking to help someone, which is a selfless act, but his motivation is from books. So, and what he has been told is how he should do, or how he should behave. So the motivation is a little uncertain. We're not given too much more insight into his thoughts here, but the behavior is still noble. Let no one, no matter his rank or state, dare to follow after the beautiful Marcella, under penalty of incurring my implacable wrath. He stands up for her. It's quite noble. It's he has ennobled himself through his behavior, even if the nobility that he is relying on was just silliness, was just that the knighthood conferred on him by the innkeeper back in the first Sally, who was reading out of a ledger book and spouting nonsense and waving a sword around. That's what he is basing his behavior on. But the behavior itself is noble, whether it's attenuated to any tradition or not. He is enacting nobility. He is performing nobility. And that's kind of what Marcella is doing. That's kind of what Grisostomo was doing. And we can sit there and say, well, they're all just a little bit loony. But in that scene, where would you be? Would you be in that crowd who want to chase down that girl and find out what she really means and why did she do that to your friend? Or would you be the one who's standing there and says, no, we're not going to do that? Again, Cervantes doesn't really say anything explicit here, but he's creating these opportunities for self-evaluation, self-reflection to say, I don't know how I would behave. I can hope for one way or the other. They all seem kind of compromised on different ways, but all I can do, like Marcella, like Grisostomo, and like Quixote, all I can do is make it up as I go along.